Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story marks a dramatic and deeply unsettling chapter in the ongoing war, a moment that many believed would never arrive. Chaos in the Kremlin is no longer just a headline or a metaphor. Ukraine's surprise strike has reached Moscow, sending shockwaves through Russia's political heart, rattling its leadership, and forcing the world to confront a new and dangerous reality. This is not simply another escalation on a distant battlefield. This is the war knocking directly on the doors of power. For months, even years, Moscow existed in a bubble of perceived safety. While Ukrainian cities endured relentless missile strikes, drone attacks, and air raid sirens, Russia's capital remained largely untouched. Life in Moscow continued with an eerie sense of normalcy. Restaurants stayed full, concerts went ahead, and state television projected confidence and control. The message was clear: the war was far away and the Kremlin was secure. That illusion has now been shattered. When news broke that Ukraine had carried out a surprise strike reaching Moscow, the immediate reaction was disbelief. Could Ukraine really reach this far? Could the most guarded city in Russia, protected by layers of air defense and security, be vulnerable? As reports multiplied, videos surfaced, and eyewitness accounts spread, disbelief turned into shock. Air defense systems lit up the night sky, emergency services mobilized, and security around government buildings tightened instantly. The capital felt something it had not felt since the early days of World War II: fear. The psychological impact of this moment cannot be overstated. Moscow is not just a city. It is the center of Russian political power, the symbol of the state, and the home of the Kremlin. Any successful strike near Moscow carries enormous symbolic weight. It challenges the idea that Russia is untouchable and that Vladimir Putin can guarantee security at home while waging war abroad. Even if the physical damage is limited, the emotional and political damage is profound. To understand why this strike matters so much, we need to understand the narrative the Kremlin has carefully constructed. From the beginning of the war, Russian leadership has portrayed the conflict as controlled, necessary, and distant. Losses were minimized, setbacks were reframed, and the suffering of Ukrainian civilians was either ignored or justified. Moscow was presented as the calm center of a storm raging elsewhere. Ukraine's surprise struck tears through that narrative in a single moment. Inside the Kremlin, this event triggers chaos on multiple levels. Politically, it exposes vulnerability. Militarily, it raises uncomfortable questions about air defense, effectiveness, and intelligence failures. Psychologically, it shakes the confidence of elites who believed the capital was beyond reach. Chaos does not always mean shouting and panic in hallways. Sometimes chaos is silent, unfolding behind closed doors as officials scramble to assign blame and assess damage. For Vladimir Putin, this moment strikes at the core of his leadership image. His authority is built on the promise of strength, stability, and control. For decades, he has presented himself as the protector of Russia, the man who restored order after the chaos of the 1990s. A Ukrainian strike reaching Moscow directly undermines that image. It suggests that despite all the power, all the resources, and all the rhetoric, Russia is not as secure as it claims. Ukraine's ability to reach Moscow also highlights the evolution of modern warfare. This is no longer a war fought only with tanks and artillery. Drones, precision strikes, intelligence sharing, and technological innovation have transformed the battlefield. Ukraine, despite facing a much larger adversary, has adapted with remarkable speed. Its surprise strike is not just a military action, but a strategic message. Distance no longer guarantees safety. From Kyiv's perspective, This strike is about accountability and pressure. Ukrainian leaders have long argued that as long as Russia's population feels insulated from the war, there is little incentive for change. Ukrainian cities have been bombed repeatedly. Civilians have lived under constant threat. Bringing the war to Moscow forces Russian society to confront the consequences of decisions made in their name. It is a harsh calculation, but one shaped by years of suffering. The concept of red lines has played a central role in Russia's messaging throughout the war. The Kremlin repeatedly warned that certain actions would provoke devastating responses. Strikes deep inside Russia, especially near Moscow, were often implied to be beyond acceptable limits. Ukraine's surprise strike challenges the credibility of those warnings. When red lines are crossed without immediate catastrophic consequences, they lose their power. Inside Russia, public reaction is complex and deeply divided. State media moves quickly to control the narrative, emphasizing intercepted threats and downplaying damage. Officials speak of resilience and strength, yet fear has a way of slipping through propaganda. For many Russians, this is the first time the war feels close, personal, and unpredictable. Air raid alerts and emergency measures force people to ask uncomfortable questions they were once encouraged to ignore. Fear changes societies. When people feel safe, they tolerate sacrifice and censorship. When safety is questioned, doubt grows. Why is the capital under threat? Why is this war continuing? Who is responsible? These questions may not lead to immediate protest, but they slowly erode trust. Authoritarian systems depend on the perception of control. Once that perception cracks even slightly, the pressure builds. The military implications of Ukraine's strike are equally significant. Moscow is protected by some of the most advanced air defense systems Russia possesses. A successful strike suggests gaps in coverage, overstretched resources, or failures in coordination. It raises concerns about whether Russia's defenses are being depleted by prolonged conflict. If Moscow can be reached, what does that mean for other critical sites? Within the Kremlin, blame is likely being quietly assigned. Intelligence agencies, military commanders, and regional authorities all come under scrutiny. In systems built on loyalty and fear, failure can be dangerous. This internal tension contributes to the sense of chaos. Decisions must be made quickly, but trust may be strained. Every option carries risk. Ukraine is fully aware that such a strike carries serious dangers. Retaliation is almost certain, and Russia may escalate attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure and civilians. But from Ukraine's perspective, escalation has been a constant reality since the beginning. Restraint did not protect Ukrainian cities. The logic now is to force Russia to feel pressure where it hurts most, in its political and psychological core. Internationally, this moment sends ripples across the globe. Western governments watch closely, balancing support for Ukraine with concerns about escalation. Some fear that strikes on Moscow could provoke unpredictable responses. Others argue that demonstrating Russia's vulnerability may actually deter further aggression. The debate highlights how fragile the global security environment has become. The symbolism of Moscow being struck resonates far beyond Russia and Ukraine. Capitals represent power, identity, and continuity. When a capital is threatened, it signals a profound shift. Ukraine's surprise strike tells the world that this war has entered a new phase, one where assumptions about safety and distance no longer apply. The role of technology and information in shaping this moment is crucial. Videos, images, and eyewitness accounts spread instantly on social media, often faster than official statements. Narrative control becomes almost impossible. Even carefully crafted messaging struggles to compete with raw, emotional footage. This digital transparency amplifies the psychological impact of the strike. For ordinary Ukrainians, the strike on Moscow brings a mix of grim satisfaction and deep anxiety. There is a sense that justice, however imperfect, is being served, but there is also fear of retaliation and concern for loved ones. Ukrainians know better than anyone how brutal escalation can be. Hope and dread coexist in uneasy balance. The humanitarian cost of the war remains devastating. Civilians continue to suffer on both sides, though responsibility for the conflict lies with political leadership. Ukrainian families endure displacement, trauma, and loss. Russian civilians, many of whom had felt insulated, now experience a glimpse of insecurity. War does not discriminate in its consequences, even if blame is clear. This moment also affects Russia's standing with allies and partners. Countries that rely on Russian security guarantees may quietly reassess their assumptions. If Moscow itself can be reached, how reliable are its promises elsewhere? This question may not be voiced publicly, but it will influence strategic calculations behind closed doors. Deterrence, a concept long central to international relations, is being tested. Russia relied on the threat of escalation to discourage certain actions. Ukraine's surprise strike suggests that deterrence has limits, especially when a nation believes its survival is at stake. This challenges traditional models of power and restraint. As the war enters this new and uncertain phase, the future is difficult to predict. Will Russia respond with overwhelming force, deepening the conflict further? Will Ukraine continue to apply pressure through symbolic and strategic strikes? Or could this shock create space for diplomacy, however fragile? History shows that wars often change direction after moments that shatter assumptions. For Vladimir Putin, the challenge ahead is immense. Maintaining authority when fear reaches the capital is far harder than projecting strength abroad. Increased repression, censorship, and surveillance may follow, but fear has a way of spreading despite control. Once people realize they are not safe, trust in leadership weakens. Globally, the strike on Moscow forces a reevaluation of modern warfare. The idea that powerful nations can keep war far from their own populations is increasingly outdated. Innovation, determination, and technology have narrowed the distance between front lines and capitals. Moscow's experience is a stark reminder of that reality. Chaos in the Kremlin does not mean collapse, but it does mean disruption. The psychological balance of the war has shifted. Ukraine has shown it can challenge not just Russian forces on the battlefield, but the sense of invulnerability at the heart of Russian power. That realization will shape decisions on both sides in the months ahead. As the world watches, one thing is clear. Ukraine's surprise strike reaching Moscow is a turning point that will be studied for years to come. It exposes vulnerabilities, reshapes narratives, and raises urgent questions about escalation, deterrence, and the future of the conflict. Whether this moment leads to deeper chaos or opens a path, however narrow, toward resolution remains uncertain. Thank you for staying with us through this in-depth analysis. If you found this breakdown insightful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more updates and deep dives as this critical story continues to unfold. Stay informed, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next video.